Dr. Laura Gabayan is a physician researcher working on a scientific study of wisdom. Having attended UCLA for college, medical school, residency, and her fellowship, she's a seasoned physician expert who decided to conduct a professional study of 60 wise individuals and adapt her learnings into her new book, Common Wisdom. My goal is to find out how a physician takes an interest in wisdom. Let's find out more. Hello, Dr. Gabayan. How are you?
Hi, thanks for having me.
No, thank you for joining. You have been a busy person. Um, you have a new book that just dropped in March, right?
Yes,
Congratulations. That's
thank you.
fantastic. Yeah. So, how much I would love to dig into uh, your medical background and all of that stuff. I really, when I was doing my research for this episode, just was, I think, flabbergasted is probably a good word, that a physician just decides, you know what, I'm going to do a professional research study on wisdom. It's not something I would have ever expected to hear. So, what inspired you to start doing this? Why wisdom?
So I was determined to be a physician, and then I pursued science, and so I got a master's as well in research, and I was like working away and publishing, and then my body fell apart, and I slowly started to develop conditions that just didn't make sense, and the physicians I talked to really did not think outside the box. So in a weird way, being a physician was a curse. It was like all that knowledge kind of contained them into diagnosing and judging and saying you have this and that. And so I was like, well, who does think outside the box? Who does have a bigger lens? And it was the wise. And then I looked into wisdom and I'm like, and then I realized the only mention of wisdom was in religions, in big religious texts, and also by famous people. And there was nobody really knew what it was. And some people had thoughts here and there, and I'm like, well, being a scientist, knowing how to do this project and knowing how to do research, I decided to study it. And when you do any project, you have to kind of learn what was out there before. And so I looked at geriatrics, psychology, sociology journals, and realized the only people who can identify wisdom are the wise, or other humans, not the wise, but other humans. No test or questionnaire or anything like that will do it. The wisdom has an inverse due relationship with age, in that the wise are between like 50 and 80 years old. They usually are not as open minded. People are not when they're older. And wisdom is not selected based on gender, race, or political affiliation, but it is based on region, like locate. That's why we did North America. And so that's when I was like, well, let me ask. We posted on social media, we posted on Nextdoor, everywhere. Let me ask if someone knows someone why. And nobody knew each other, and these were not friends of people. Of course, they were just like, oh yeah, I went to college with this person, they make good decisions, or I went to this, or I know this person. And it just grew in that once I interviewed someone, they recommended or nominated someone else, and that's how it just grew.
Okay. Can you elaborate a little bit on how you selected those 60 individuals for your study?
Well, it's funny because as a scientist, you really can't have a say in who joins and who doesn't. But
Okay.
I was just gonna let the numbers tell me what, the more people I have, the more I get the same stories per se. And it was true. It's funny because at around 20, I heard a lot of the same things. And yet I kept going. I wanted to be a good number. So we went up to 60, but technically I could have stopped at around 20 or 30. But at 60, I was like, that's a good number of people. These people have no idea who anyone else is. They don't know each other, and yet I'm hearing similar stories. Or a similar sense of, you know, first of all, there was, if you looked at my 10 questions, there's no, so all of them got the same 10 questions, and there was no question as to, how, what do you think wisdom is? It was not that. It was, a lot of the questions were more about them and how they live their life. And I got a sense that they were at peace. They were content. They were not very, like, I would say, opinionated about one thing versus another. They were open, and that's where tolerance came from as well. But they were kind of more. I would say wisdom was a code word for for living a meaningful life, for being having a deep understanding of things. That's what it was, because
Sure.
I didn't know what wisdom was.
Right. And I'm going to get to your definition of wisdom here shortly. But can you how did you as a physician integrate scientific methodology into your exploration of wisdom?
So, in order to do any research project, you have to have a bunch of scientific methods for doing it. You do your search of what was in there, just the different ways of doing you when you come up with it. There's two kinds of research you do. There's one where you build a hypothesis and you do what we call qualitative research, and those are the numbers. And quantitative, I mean, qualitative is what we did, is where you start off from a blank slate and you have no idea what's going on, and that's where you assign ideas. You take stories and you convert it into data, and that's what we did. We took stories and converted it into data. And so this is a qualitative study.
In your research, you identified 8 elements of wisdom. Could you briefly give me the elevator pitch of those 8 types for us?
So the reason the book is called Common Wisdom is because we found those 8 common elements of wisdom amongst all those people, but they're in order of what was most common, and versus least common. So the first one is most common. So I'll give you the order, and it was resilience, kindness, positivity, spirituality, humility, tolerance, creativity, and curiosity. And that was the order. And if you think about it, they're all related. You need to be curious to be tolerant, and creative and positive to be resilient. And so I think all of them are related.
So I think I agree. I think what I understood through your research and through reading was the commonalities among the interviewees. So did you at any time, so you had 60 individuals that were either self-nominated or nominated by
No,
someone else
they
as
couldn't be
not
self-nominated.
okay, good clarification. Thank you. So someone else said this is a wise individual and the age is typically did you say 50 to
So they
80?
had to be 50 to 79. So it was
Okay.
50s, 60s, and 70s. And obviously they had to speak English. It was North America, and it was the US and Canada. And that was it. They could not self nominate. It's funny because initially I had a definition based on literature. Someone who makes good decisions, someone who gives sound advice, someone who, it was, I had, a few, but no one used the definition. People just thought in their head, oh, I know one person, or I know this person, and that was it. Or like most, they may not have. Just calling someone wise was a big step, and it was not common.
Okay. Okay. Because I can if I had to sit back and think of all the people in my life and who would I consider wise, I probably say one, maybe two people.
Yeah, and that's what we thought. It was like
Mhm.
maybe one, and you've talked to a lot of people, but
Sure.
maybe one here. And it's funny because when I was writing the book, and my editor was like, "So if we say there are 6,000 people, we would think we would find the same results." I'm like, "You're never gonna find 6,000 wise people. Never."
Mhm.
Maybe in the world you have 600, maybe, but even that, I mean, finding the 60 was not easy, and it was hard, and it was all over the place, like, as I said.
I bet. I mean, I know nothing about being a physician or anything about being wise. but I do get statistics, so I could imagine the obstacle to get these individuals, identified. Yeah,
Well,
crazy.
and they had to fill out a questionnaire,
Mhm.
make sure they were the right age group, and then they had to set up a time to meet with me. It was not easy. I do have to say that COVID helped and that people were very
Okay.
used to having
Yeah.
online interviews or online talks. But overall, I think it was just not easy finding them. I definitely have gone through the difficulty of finding the people, defining wisdom, and the book, and that's why it was really important to me that okay, so I have these letters behind my name. I went through the difficulty of defining it, but the book needs to be very user friendly and very
Mhm.
easy to read. Just because I don't want it to be long and arduous, I want it to be relatable, and that's what it is.
Perfect. So these 8 common types of wisdom is if saying that wrong, please correct me.
8
They're not 8,
elements,
they're
so,
not types
in
of wisdom,
qualitative
elements, thank
research,
you.
you call it themes.
Okay,
In qualitative
perfect.
research, because, what was the overlying theme that you saw? But we same idea as characteristics or elements, but we call them elements in the
Okay,
book.
elements makes perfect sense. So can you be missing any of these 8 elements and still be a wise person?
So it's funny because of all those 60 people, only one person had all 8. And there was a team of us. There was me and two others, and we assigned them. Most people had between 2 and 5, and one person had all 8. And so I think the goal of this, first of all, I want to break down wisdom. And second of all, I want everyone to realize, no, you can be good at one thing and not good at the other, or and that's why having the 8 broken up, you kind of figure out what's good for you and what's not. Like spirituality, for example, I was never a spiritual person. Being in medicine and science, you measure what you see, and if you don't see it, it doesn't exist. So the last thing they would ever believe in or teach me was there was a bigger entity. And that's, for example, and that has changed, but that's how I started. So I think it's important to realize that any one of the 8 can be not as strong or stronger, whatever you
Okay.
see.
Got it. No, perfect. Because I'm reading through the list, and you hit on the head. My first thought was spirituality. That feels a like it would almost be outside of the scope for this kind of study, and b like it's pretty easy to not be spiritual. So thank you for the clarification. You can be strong in some. You can have almost all of them, or you can only have one really well one. Resilience, for example, makes complete sense for a wise individual, in my opinion. What do I know?
I agree.
But things like spirituality and tolerance, those kind of get you into some sketchy waters sometimes when you're talking about a wise individual. If someone asked me who would I think is wise, I would think people like Gandhi or the Dalai Lama, who are very, very spiritual individuals. So that makes sense. But there's also amazing tycoons of business or medicine who, exactly as you said, have no spiritual basis. So thank you for clarifying that.
But I
So
think with spirituality, I do have to say it's
sure.
really important to differentiate spirituality and religiosity. The
Okay.
two
Yeah.
are not the same. And I think while being religious can help you be spiritual, it's not related necessarily.
hmm
And I mean, it just isn't. And some people think it is, but it really isn't.
Yeah. Probably my favorite of the 8 is curiosity. And this is my own perspective, projecting it onto your work, forgive me, but I feel like you have to be curious at least a little bit to be wise, right? How else are you going to be able to adapt and find and learn these new concepts and be able to espouse them and understand them without that curiosity? To me was probably my favorite of the 8.
But I think the curiosity is kind of like, in my opinion, the engine that feeds all of them. That
Okay.
kind of is the reason you are resilient. You are kind. You are tolerant. You are humble. You are all of those because you're curious. So and I think someone mentioned it. Oh well, some people are more curious and creative. I'm like, well, if you think about it, as kids, we're all creative and we're all curious. Kids ask so many questions and they're all like turn the most random thing into something else in their head. So they're very curious and creative. And so I think that a person has it in them and they just have to bring it out.
I love that thought. That's fantastic. So, of all of the 60 individuals that you interviewed and gave this assessment, and was there one single commonality you could find between all 60 wise individuals?
No, I think well, no, but resilience was a big one. As I
Okay.
said,
Mhm.
it was amazing to me how much difficulty and trauma they had gone through. And if you think about it, the person who hasn't, who is shallow, is not someone you would ever think is wise.
Mhm.
Right? And so in a way, it kind of made them stronger. They realized one person talks about how it's important to her that in life, and it's true, to be fiercely flexible. She quoted that. And it was fascinating to me. There was not one person that stood out, but the resilience factor was a big one.
So, and this might seem like a silly question, but do you have to be older to be wise?
It's funny. I don't necessarily think so, but I think to have wisdom, you do need life experiences. So I think it's part like a 20-year-old just won't have them. It's fascinating to And me. so There I was
Mhm.
think if someone is 50, they will, but I think not necessarily. And the same is true. Like if you think about it, if you talk to someone who's older, they're not necessarily wise, right? Just because they're older. And so I think the combination of, okay, what are they doing with their life experiences? How are they viewing them and being older can help. But I don't think one goes hand in hand with the other.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense to me because experience doesn't equate to wisdom, right?
Right.
Just because you've experienced a lot in your life does not mean you have properly accepted it, worked it through, understood, and be able to come out on the other end a better person. I think a lot of people have had a lot of experiences, but probably don't come out on the Y spectrum. So yeah,
Well,
that
they
makes perfect
may
sense.
be angry about it. They may not have learned from it. There's many
Hmm.
things, right?
Yeah. So, although I have to say, when I was 20, I probably thought I was pretty wise. Probably not even close, though.
Well, it's funny because that's the thing I was telling my publicist. Wisdom is not a very sexy topic. Nowadays, when you think about it, we have social media, we have the internet, everything talks about glitz and glamour, and nothing really focuses on depth and meaning. Or humility, oh, God forbid, no way, humility. But people really want to show off, and other people want more likes and followers, and it's just a whole other world.
Do you believe that wisdom changes by generation? And what I mean by that is right now, take a snapshot, the individuals who are 79 years old right now, today, are two or three generations removed from the current one. Do you believe that, I'll try and explain my logic here. What I'm trying to say, I'll just ask it bluntly. Do you believe that as this, newer generations come in, and exactly as you said, it's a lot about likes and social media and kind of maybe more surface level validation type things, that we may lose some wise individuals that other generations may have had? And when I think of a wise person, I think of someone older. I think of someone who's 79, 80 years old. And I look at it almost as in, oh, that's just a different generation. I can't think of, and I'm sure by the time someone my age gets to be 79, I'm sure there will be plenty of wise people. But do you believe that wisdom, as in the definition of wisdom or the volume of wise people, is changing as the world changes?
I break that down to the eight elements, and if you think about it, 300 years ago, when I think about the eight elements, I'm like, no, that's not going to change. You're going to have a resilient person 300 years ago and now. They may have different comforts, but they're still resilient, or kindness. I mean, it may be a little different, but they're still at the foundation of it. They still have those eight elements. And so, no, I don't think it's going to be different based on the difference, the generation. But I do think the obstacles can be different. And I do think what's considered the noise, I guess you would say, right? The noise that they're encountering could be different. But I mean, it's funny because even now, like, if you think about it, I feel like there's more of a difference between wisdom and all these likes and followers and the internet. There's more of it, so it's more pronounced.
Yeah. No, and so you're saying there's hope, you know? Perfect. So how can individuals who are not in would be considered a typical age range for this? How can people internalize your message and these 8 themes to help themselves? What do you hope people who want to develop some of these themes a bit stronger, what can they do to get can a person go on a journey to get wise? I guess that's the question I'm trying to ask.
Well, the goal of my book, Common Wisdom, was for it to be like a friend, like a companion that will be with you when you're 20, when you're whatever age range, and then down the years, and the goal is for everyone to kind of, as we talked about, decide what they're good at and what they're not. And when you think about wisdom, and I think you're asking this question, is it is it important to have wisdom to live your life, or is the goal of life to attain wisdom, right?
Ooh, that is a good
One or
distinction.
the other.
Mhm.
And I would probably say both. I think if your goal in life is to learn and to become stronger, then yes, you'll become wiser. And if you have a baseline of wisdom, then you won't let those things upset you as much. You kind of view it in a different light. So I think the combination of the two can help. Do I think that one or the other is it? No. I think having the combination is it. I think it'll help you.
Absolutely. So, your book in general, how what kind of reception have you been getting so far? What are some responses you're getting from
No,
readers?
for the most part, not most part, most people, whoever's read it has been like, wow, this has changed my life. And a lot of people have been like, this is so easy to read. It's so relatable. And when you read the resilient chapter, you'll be like, wow, I thought I had it bad. You will not believe what people went through,
True.
and how they overcame their difficulties and viewed them as a lesson. Don't get me wrong, they were emotionally difficult. They didn't like it. They weren't happy about it, but they kind of overcame it. They realized it was not something that will stop them. And the idea, and I say this often, is things happen for you and not to you. It's not, don't say why me, say why not me. I can do it. And live in faith, don't live in fear. And those are three tenets that I think are really important. I don't know if I talked about the third one in my resilient chapter, but I think that it's really an important lesson.
I love that takeaway, and I think the search to continue to grow is the message that there's hope, and I think it's pretty easy to confuse intelligence with wisdom. But yeah, please
And I
clarify
have
what's the
something to say
distinction
about that.
between intelligence and wisdom? Please, that's
So it's
definitely what I
funny
want to touch
because
on.
initially, so I hired a research assistant and someone who was in charge of the media to try to find the 60.
Hmm.
And they both initially were like, oh, we assumed wisdom was knowledge and intelligence. And then they're like, but realize it's not. And going back to, you said the feedback I've gotten, a few people said to me, I'm an intelligent person, but I'm not wise. One of my editors said that after reading this. I'm like, no, the goal is not for you to say that. The goal is for you to be like, oh, I'm good at this, I'm not good at that. And anyway, so going back to intelligence and wisdom, they're not related. I mean, if you think about someone who's wise, may be curious and they may want to get more degrees and they may want to learn more. But the two, like, you've met plenty of people, I'm sure, that have letters behind their name. I see
Sure.
letters because I've letter,
Mhm.
whatever. They've gotten degrees and they are not necessarily good decision makers. They don't give good advice. They're not wise. So the two could look like they overlap, but not really. And you've also met people who don't have formal education but are very wise.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think what I the phrase I remember about the difference between intelligence and wisdom is intelligence is knowing that a tomato is a fruit, but wisdom is knowing that you shouldn't put a tomato in fruit salad, right? And I love that phrase. So great clarification. So I have a bit of a personal question for you, Dr.
Sure.
Bryan. What did you get out of this research? What did you discover either about yourself or just a philosophy after all of this research?
So I realized that this is really a gift. My condition, and I still have a hard time walking. I can't walk. And so I realized that, as hard as it was and as it has been, it's a gift. And I learning about these fascinating people and kind of talking to them. What I got out of it was how important these elements are, especially the one I did not really have in me. It's not like I was a mean person, but the second element, kindness, was
Mhm.
nothing I focused on. I married a kind man, but nothing I kind of thought was important. And now I do. And so I think it's kind of made me less anxious, made me more less of a doer and more of a beer. Being versus doing. And my husband was like, "Oh, that sounds so utopian. It sounds so unrealistic." I'm like, "No, it's true. Being able to enjoy the moment is different than, doing. And so, anyways, I think it's definitely made me step back.
Okay. That's great. That's a great insight. So your book's been out for about 4 months now. And so I don't really want to talk about what's in the future for you because you're still in it.
Yeah, I'm
But
very
but
much in the vein.
yeah, but are you fascinated by wisdom now? Are you going to continue the study and research?
Oh, definitely. It's funny because someone asked, "Are you gonna do something else? Or are you thinking about your second book?" I'm like, "No, that I know. I'm not writing a second book right now. I Right now my focus is on this, and my focus has been on the wisdom part is more of a realizing there is something bigger than I have a wider lens, and I use my experience to kind of come up with this. And I don't know the road I'm gonna go down. I don't know what's gonna happen in a few months or next year. I don't know. But I do know that my fascination with wisdom, it's really more of a fascination of what else is there. It's more of a fascination of yes, but like looking at the other angle of things. And these are things that I had not learned before. So I definitely feel like I have a bigger lens now.
I love it. Okay, so one of my final questions for you is, once again, I'm still fascinated with a physician who studies wisdom. I understand your perspective, and it's fascinating. Do you think there's value in physicians who I don't think anyone can sit here and argue that they are not intelligent individuals? Do you think there's value in physicians, doctors, medical personnel who are obviously very intelligent individuals to also practice or seek to attain wisdom as well?
Oh, definitely. I think, well, the value comes from when you want to interact with the physician that is human. is
Mhm.
kind of looks at all the options, doesn't just look at like, oh, this and that, and let's do this. And but you want to interact with the physician that entertains the idea of having a healer, for example, having a therapist, for example, like having many people on the team. The ultimate goal of having a patient is getting them better, and putting your ego aside and caring about how they do, and realizing we're all there in it together. So I think the physician you want to look at is someone who is not look at a physician you want on your team is some or helping you is someone who is kind of more worldly, like someone who has more of a sense of humanity, has a sense of there's many different modalities for you to get better.
Yeah.
Because I did not interact with that initially. I did not. I kind of met more people who were very like by the book. They're kind of
Mhm.
more like do this, do that, go here, don't go. You know what I mean? And that's what
Absolutely.
made me look elsewhere.
Yeah. So just it creates a more well-rounded, holistic person who's not afraid to think outside the box. Exactly how you started this podcast today is about thinking outside the box, and I can tell that your mind is open, and it's awesome to see. And I agree. My physician, I would like to be able to at least consider other perspectives and different ways of looking at things. So I absolutely understand what you're saying. I think that's fantastic. So, Dr. Gabayan, you speak as a very intelligent and wise individual. It's been really, really cool learning about this stuff with you. Where can people learn more about your book and about you as well? Where can people find more information?
So the book Common Wisdom is available on Amazon and many other websites as well, but it's on Amazon. And common, the reason I chose the word common is because what was common among all these people and what were the eight elements. And also they were common everyday individuals. So the idea of common wisdom was that's where it came from. I have a website, lauragabayan.com. I also have a website called the wisdomresearchproject.com, and that was what I initially used and then changed. But that's how I got recruited the 60 people. So they knew that it was a legit program and that I was actually there to assess, talk to them and who I was and etc. So I have both websites, and at the end of the day, it's if someone is interested, I think if they do a Google search for wisdom and Dr. Laura, they'll come up with me. But anyways, I'm used to being called Dr. G. But anyways, so that's
That's wonderful. And of course we will link your book and your personal websites to in the show notes of the show. Um First off, thank you so much for coming on the show
of
tonight. I
course.
really appreciate your perspective. I think I'm still just fascinated. And for the listeners out there, I strongly recommend go check out Dr. Gabayan's book. Dr. G, sorry, that's so much easier to say, but
One thing I forgot to tell
yeah.
you is this podcast will be aired right in time that of July 11th and 12th. We have a promo in that Amazon will offer the ebook for free to download on Kindle. And I didn't know you can have a Kindle app. So if you have the Kindle app on your phone, apparently. So anyways, just want to let you know.
Wonderful. Yes, absolutely. So this podcast is coming out on July 8th. So if you're listening to it, it's probably July 8th or somewhere around there. Absolutely go out to Amazon on the 11th and 12th and get Dr. G's book. It's a fascinating perspective on something that you wouldn't expect from a physician. I think it opens your eyes to other possibilities and as she said, just a much more well-rounded person, and it
Yes,
gives you steps and kind of goals to at least begin desiring to attain them. Once again, just to cover them one more time, the eight themes of wisdom that you cover are resilience, kindness, positivity, spirituality, tolerance, humility, creativity, and curiosity. And I
yes,
think any human being who develops at least some of those traits is going to be a better person and a better world.
I agree.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again, Doctor G, and I really appreciate your time here.
Thank you for having me.
Perfect. And for those who continue to listen, thank you for hanging on. Check the show notes for all of the links and follow Dr. G and see the really fascinating stuff she's doing. But in the meantime, we'll talk to you next week.